Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the Free Zone with Norm. With us tonight, with me as always is Derek. Derek, how you doing this evening?
Pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. And with us is our guest tonight, J.W. Finn. We got J.W. Finn to come on here and talk a little bit about gun safety. And J.W., why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your training and everything?
Sure. Probably back in, of course, I grew up in the hunting world with my dad, and um, back in, I believe it was 2012, uh, the concealed carry program got real popular in the States. So at the time, I had a little gun shop. I was partners with a little gun shop, and we just thought it'd be a great idea to uh, bring something to this part of the state that was hard to get. So I typically, to get into the Kansas concealed carry instructor portion, you have to either be military or law enforcement. So the only other option was going through the NRA. So I went through the NRA instructor program and then finished up through the Kansas concealed carry program to become an instructor.
Yeah. And so you do concealed carry classes here in the state of Kansas. And you've got one coming up this weekend, I noticed. How often do you do concealed carry classes?
I probably average 2 or 3 a year. I've gotten busy with other projects, so I've kind of put it on the back burner. But um, I'm gonna try to ramp that up. There seems to be more interest, and I do. I'm certified in 3 other programs through the NRA. One is called "Refuse to Be a Victim." Um, it's just an informative class that's kind of geared towards all different safeties. Traveling safety, cybersecurity stuff. It's a really neat class. I just don't get a lot of interest in that.
Right.
And then I also do a basic pistol course for new shooters, first time shooters.
Right. So
I was gonna ask just to sort of like lay some. So like you grew up here, so it makes sense that like you've shot guns and stuff. But I interviewed your mom a few years ago, and like I really thought like your mom and dad just like were born out there, where their house. I was like, but they're not from here at all. Like they're transplants. Do you think that your interest in guns as an adult is 100% directly related to your dad giving you guns as a kid, or do you think that's something that once you just started reading more about it, you just took off flying with it anyway? Or
That was just always part of our lives. So I don't know that I didn't have a chance, but to be interested in them, that was just kind of part of our raising.
Yeah. One thing that I want to talk about is concealed carry laws here in the state of Kansas. Okay. A lot of people don't realize that you don't have to have a permit to carry in the state of Kansas, but what are some reasons why you should have a permit?
So Kansas has always been a very gun friendly state. So most of the legislation is usually reflects positively for the gun laws. So basically, I think it was in 2017. Don't quote my dates, but that's close. Kansas went to what they call a constitutional carry law, which allowed it doesn't require you to have a license to either to conceal carry or open carry.
Right.
But in order to carry across state lines in states that reciprocate with Kansas, which I believe there's 38 other states that reciprocate, which means they accept our license.
Right.
So in order to carry across state lines, it's required. And of course, being down here in the corner, it makes sense.
You're crossing state lines all the time. Yeah.
So the word conceals like the most important part of the whole thing. Like, so I guess explain to me, because I don't know. Like, so if you just have your gun out where everybody can see it, like that's not an issue. It's the issue is like everybody needs to know you're armed. Basically, is that where concealing it is like the caveat of like why you have to have a license in some places? Or
correct. So basically, if you're going to open carry, it has to be completely exposed, and if you're going to conceal carry, it has to be completely concealed. And there is a statute in the law about partial concealment. So I think it's based off what is your intent. It needs to be obvious.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I noticed that you offered a couple's option for your class this weekend. Is that something that you get a lot? Couples doing concealed carry? Sorry.
Yeah. It's, I don't know how I even came up with that. I just know that a lot of times husbands want their wives to take the course. They feel better about their wives traveling.
Right.
And typically wives learn better from not their husband. So it's just been a good way to get husbands and wives in the class together. Then they go home, they talk about it. My biggest thing is I don't really agree with the law on it. I think carrying a firearm comes with a lot of responsibility, and this curriculum the state set up says if you've never touched a gun, you take this 8-hour course, and if you pass, then they deem you responsible to carry. And
right.
I don't agree with that. I think it needs to be a lot more. It needs to be it's a lifestyle is what it really is, because there is a lot of responsibility with it.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. I think, of course, it's, you look at what it takes to get a driver's license, and sometimes, then you wonder why so many people can't seem to drive, So, yeah, I get what you're saying.
So for somebody to me, the people who have it out where they're brandishing it and everybody can see it, I've heard a lot of people who are gun enthusiasts make jokes about them, or basically say I guess, what is the point of concealing it? I guess, what is the strong suit of having it where nobody knows you have a gun?
Mainly security, or not to become a target, would be my opinion. I'm not a fan of open carry. The only times I open carry is during training, and that's just because my firearms coming in and out of the holster so many times. But I think it just goes back to that surprise tactic. It's really nobody's business what you have, in my opinion. And there's been cases. I'm part of a group that we study statistics and get all these kind of incidents coming in, and there's criminals are smart, and I think people forget that. So they essentially they're going to scan the room and kind of see what kind of threat they're dealing with, and if they see a guy with a 45 strapped on, they're probably going to take him out first, or deal with him. It kind of comes down to a Ford and Chevy thing at the end of the day, but that's just my opinion.
I think one thing too, I think research has shown that concealed carry, when states first passed concealed carry, and in the subsequent few years after that, they've generally seen a dip in crime. And I think part of that is because there's a deterrent factor in not knowing who might be carrying, that you don't get with open carry.
Yeah. And another, if you're going to conceal carry, there's all types of folks in this world. And even if you're in Oklahoma City or Denver or Kansas City, Wichita, you might run into that person that makes a big deal out of you having a firearm exposed, that they're scared of it or whatever. That would draw unwanted attention to your family. And
all right. So walk us through what your concealed carry class is like. You told us it's only 8 hours, but what types of things do you do in your concealed carry classes?
So the curriculum set up, like I said earlier, if you've never touched a firearm, it starts at the very, very basics. So we spend a couple hours just going over pistol types, pistol functions, jams, some scenarios and what and how to deal with things.
Right.
And then we tear into it's called the Kansas Family Protection Act, which is the actual law of the concealed carry program. And it gets a little mundane, I'm not going to lie, because I'm not an attorney, so I'm not allowed to interpret it. So a lot of people have questions that I just can't answer, but it usually, a lot of the better classes, a lot of people start coming up with scenarios and wild scenarios. I don't care. I like talking through them because it just allows an opportunity for education. But once we do that, then you take a written test, and you have to pass the written test with 100%.
Right.
And then we go to the range, and to qualify at the range, you shoot 5 shots with one hand at 3 yards, 10 shots, 2 hands at 7 yards, and 10 shots, 2 hands at 10 yards.
Yeah, and I think that's something that, you know, people that don't know a lot about guns would be surprised at, is how close the distances that you're actually shooting are, and how realistic that is to most self-defense scenarios.
Yeah, the highest majority of self-defense shootings occur between 3 and 7 yards. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was living in Arizona, they had the medical marijuana card option, but then a lot of people were telling me like that, like because of some laws, basically like people, you could go do that, you could go be a part of that community, but essentially you were going to be foregoing like your right to own a firearm, which I mean on paper makes sense. But I asked probably 6 police officers when I was living in Phoenix like what they thought about it, and all of them had the same blank look on their face, and they were like, I don't know. But all 6 police officers said, if you don't have a gun, you should get a gun. And so one of the officers said something, and I'm sure it's like a pretty like popular quote, but basically like he said he would rather be judged by 12 than carried by 6, which I think at the end of the day, the reason that we have guns is for home safety. In your opinion, do you feel like our justice system is developed to protect people? Like, do you feel like, my question is you can take all the training in the world and you can have your gun legally, but I feel like in modern day America, if you kill another human being, whether or not they're stealing your TV or not, do you feel like our judicial system is going to give people who are participating in home defense like a lot of issues?
So we've studied a lot of those cases, and it really depends on where you live is what I've found. So if you're, you know, out in this part of the world, I think the courts are going to typically rule in your favor. Now that, back to my comment about the responsibility, you know, you have to be able to justify that your life was in threat, or your life was threatened.
Yeah.
So it's not just the Wild West. You got a badge, carry a gun type deal. And, you know, and with the current going ons that's happened in this area, I know that's what a lot of the country thinks, but you know, for the most part, they would probably fall over if they knew how many of us had guns all the time while we stopped and helped them change their tire, and they were none the wiser. You know, we're all good people, but like I said, there's a lot of responsibility. And I know that, you know, like in Texas, there was a case, I'll tell the story real quick. This lady was standing at a bus stop, had her hand inside her purse, holding onto her gun. This guy runs by and snatches her purse off, and she shoots him 6 times in the back. Doesn't kill him. And as an instructor, I would not recommend that because the threat's leaving, right? So she was able to convince the court that due to the personal information in her purse, her life was still a threat, and the case was dismissed. Another one, there was an old man living in Missouri, and this was 5 or 6 years ago. He had a group of kids that kept breaking in his house and just kind of harassing him and stealing his medications and whatnot. So he put in this high-end security system that also had audio. So the kids came in. He waited at the bottom of the stairs. The first kid walked up. He shoots him. Second kid walks up, shoots him. Well, he didn't kill either one. And then he walked up to them after they'd fallen down and said, you know, something along the lines of, you'll never rob me again, and shoots them both one more time, which killed him, and he was convicted of murder. Yeah. So at the point of the first shot, he had every right, but you are required to stop when the threat stops.
Yeah, exactly. That's, you know, something that we used to, I had some law enforcement classes in college, you know, and I know something that we talked about. We talked about homeowners defending their home. And, you know, I know that was something that they always tried to make clear, you know, when somebody's coming into your home, that's self-defense. When they're running away from you out into your yard, that's no longer self-defense, you know?
So like legally, that's the right thing. But like personally, like, cause I've always had like this debate inside, like, okay, like I get like if they're running away from me, like if I shoot them, then therefore like I'm probably a criminal. They're no longer a threat. But like, is there any part of you that feels like that lives by that mantra of like, don't start nothing, won't be nothing? I was sitting here having dinner with my family. You caused this. Now, like, because to me, like that's a slippery slope. You know, like, is my life in danger? No. Am I really pissed? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, and that's where I really think a guy has to. I encourage everybody that takes my class to play out scenarios. You know, when you go sit at a restaurant with your family, just say, okay, if this happens, because the reality is when something tragic happens, your brain shuts off. You go into muscle memory mode, so you're going to react to whatever you've practiced, and it requires a lot of self-control in those situations. I mean, Derek, I totally get what you're saying, but at the end of the day, so Kansas is covered by, it's called the Castle Doctrine, which gives you the right to protect what your property and your being, include your family, and it actually travels with you. So even if you're out and about, and you're allowed to meet whatever level of force is brought towards you, and then at any point during the incident that your life is in danger, then you are allowed to use deadly force. But once that comes in, you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that your life was in danger. Now, the caveat to that is nobody out there can tell you what you deem was threatening.
Right.
Somebody like me, that firearms instructor, study martial arts. I do women's self-defense classes as well. It better be real obvious that my life was in danger, because they're, the prosecutor's going to say this guy's a trained,
right,
X, Y, and Z. So, I tell the girls, a lot of them get made fun of for the pink and purple guns they carry. I'm like, those are great in a courtroom. You turn on the tears and the little pink gun. It's not scary.
Yeah. Go ahead, Worm.
Well, I was going to say, and that brings me to a question that I wanted to ask you. And I'm not talking about specific brands or anything like that, but what type of and I also know it depends greatly on the shooter, but what type of a gun would you recommend for concealed carry and for self-defense?
That's just, it's almost like, what kind of holster should I use? If you get into this lifestyle, it's an investment, because I would actually encourage you to find a gun shop that allows you to shoot different guns. Because I know with females, we have a lot of trouble with semi-automatics because their wrists are weak. And after that first shot on the cycle, it'll stovepipe that next round because their wrist is taking too much of the recoil. Mm-hmm. So, and a semi-automatic's a little more complicated to understand or grasp the concepts of. So in that scenario, I say, well, a revolver, right? Again, and then you get into the price thing. What, at the end of the day, what's your life worth? Are you going to skimp and buy a cheap gun and throw it in the, because a gun you carry every day is I tell this in the class, it's like a belly button. You're going to find stuff in that pistol. You have no idea how it got there. So it better be a good one if it's going to function.
Yeah.
I was at the drummer from my band, El Trevino. He's a big gun guy. He takes all the courses and everything. And I know what it's like to go out in public with him. Like, he can't sit facing away from the front door of a restaurant. So like, to me, like, as like a fly on the wall, watching somebody be like you, basically, a part of me feels like, are you a tortured soul? Like, is it this level of paranoia you have, which is, I'm glad you have it. Cause if somebody walks in here, I don't have a gun, you might be able to save me. But like, is that taxing at all? Like, that you can't just go to the restaurant with your family and have a meal. Like, you have to sit a certain way. And second part of that question, why do you feel the personal need to protect strangers? I mean, because at the end of the day, like, if you're in a restaurant in Guyman, you don't really know anybody in there, but you're going to pull your gun out and protect. What do you, I guess, answer those 9 questions I just threw at you?
So to the first part, I don't consider it a paranoia. I just consider it being prepared. And if you want to split the hairs there, I could find something in your life that I'm
a hypochondriac. I
so,
know 10 things in this room that can kill me, but just for the listeners. Yeah.
So that's the difference. I like to say it's not paranoia, it's just being prepared. And a lot of it, I think, growing up in the culture I grew up in, with the going through Boy Scouts and the whole deal. I think a lot of that just is naturally instilled, and then just a small town community. We're all willing to help people a lot of times, but I do tell people, Derek, you need to know what type of person you are in a tense situation, because you there's fight or flight people,
Yeah.
and neither one's wrong. Neither one's wrong, but you need to know which one you are, because if you don't do what's natural to you, you become part of the problem potentially. So I'm just always one that's been that, if there's a fight, if there's something going down, my nose is right in the middle of it. I've always been that way. I don't know why, but
Yeah, I think that's an important thing too there.
I got a couple more questions if Norm has it, but one thing I was gonna say, like, say like we needed you to teach 50 guys gun safety in 5 minutes, like that, they're like, that's all the time you have. Like, what do you feel like are just some basic rules that like anybody should know if they're even getting anywhere near a firearm?
the two things I'd say is every firearm you see, consider it loaded, and don't cover anything with the muzzle or the end of that gun that you're not willing to destroy, because that's how accidents happen. And in that state of Kansas, actually, there's no such thing as a negligent or a accidental discharge. It's not a term used anymore. It's all considered negligent. So, but those are the two things. And if you're scared of it, don't touch it.
Yeah, I agree with that. All right, so it's the middle of the night. You hear something in your house. Which weapon are you reaching for?
I'm going shotgun.
Yeah, that's me too.
Because you can just get close with that. But again, I encourage everybody to have a home safety plan for an event like that. I want to know where my kids are. I don't need one running down the hallway.
Absolutely.
They know that they immediately get under their bed and stay there until they hear dad.
Yeah.
My wife is a better shot than me, actually. So their chances aren't well of making it out of the house. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I get it. I'm with you though. That's my first instinct and I've got an 870, just a good old fashioned pump shotgun. That's my first instinct.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
and the thing to consider too is that the level of responsibility is the thing that I don't think very many people grasp. And if I lose sleep on anything, it's this, to kind of go back to Derek's point on paranoia. The minute I pull that trigger, I'm responsible for everything that happens after that.
Absolutely.
So if I crack off a 308 in the living room, it's going through several neighbors' houses. Absolutely. Potentially. So, and I'm responsible for that. So something that could start out as self-defense could be a manslaughter charge pretty easy.
Absolutely. Yeah.
One thing I want to talk about is I think that if you watch the news, they'll tell you that politically, like, there's just two sides. And like a week and a half ago, I had a guy on my show who's a gay guy from California. He's a furry, which means like he dresses up like, but whatever that. And he's also a born again Christian, and he's a gun enthusiast. So the guy's all so like my point is, like, there's a lot of people into guns and it's not a party line thing. But one thing, like a week and a half ago, we saw in like Michigan, there was a school shooter, and they're actually putting his parents in prison for like 15 to 20 years apiece. My question to you, JW, is you seem like a kind of guy that like respects firearms a lot. Like, do you feel like if you go to the classes, you do all the work, and you become knowledgeable with this tool, and you keep it in your house, do you think that the buck ends there, or do you think it's then that person's responsibility to let everybody in the house like know what the consequences of these things are? I guess my question is, like, what are your thoughts on punishing a parent for the sins of their kid? You know what I mean?
So the specifics on that case were kind of wild, because I think the prosecutors were able to convince the jury that the parents had some previous knowledge that probably should have been mentioned. But in the norm, I think it goes back to that home safety plan that you have with your kids, or roommate or whatever it is. It's your responsibility to say, hey, there's a gun here, or I keep everything locked up in quick release safes and stuff like that, because that's what works at my house. Right. And I don't want a kid or a grandkid or somebody's friend I don't want an accident. Yeah. And that's just part of the responsibility of owning a firearm, I think.
This is a question. The safe word in the studio is cheeseburger. If you want to answer, but I'm just kind of curious. Like, so I've known some people who will get like a shotgun for home defense, and they'll always say like they'll put like the first round will be like birdshot, and I'm assuming that is like to have one non-lethal option to disarm somebody. But my question is, like, legally, do you want the person that broke into your house to be able to have a side of the story?
So let me answer this in two parts. It's hard to convince somebody your life's being threatened if you fire a warning shot or you try to wing them, or so you shoot to stop the threat, period. Okay. And then I'll just say that if I end up in a courtroom, I'd rather just have one story instead of two.
Yeah. Something too that I'm going to tell you, Derek, is at the distances that you would be firing at in a home defense situation, birdshot is lethal. Okay. It has not had enough time to spread. It's almost like a solid projectile at the distances that you're generally talking about in a home defense situation.
Yeah.
And so if you were shooting at somebody 30, 40 yards away, then it's probably non-lethal. But we're talking 3 to 7 yards, there's not going to be any spread in that at all. Obviously a little bit of it depends on the shotgun, but not much. Even with an improved cylinder shotgun, you're going to get a lot of spread, or very little spread in only 3 to 7 yards.
I wanted to ask you to talk on like the culture of guns, like rap videos, people flailing around. What are your thoughts on the fact that, like, because obviously you're somebody who likes guns, like I don't think you want any politicians to take them away, but like, what are your thoughts on a gun in the hand of somebody who's dumb enough to aim it at a cameraman? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that you look at Hollywood, hasn't helped that. Video games haven't helped that. I tell you one thing I've been thinking of, because Derek had reached out a couple weeks ago, and I want to do soon this summer. I want to do it'll be free, just for kids safety class. Cause I get to looking back, and unless you go and take a hunter safety course, you don't get any gun safety anymore. Yeah. It's like changing a tire, unless you as a dad go show your kid, they're not going to learn it anywhere else. And I can remember as a small child, my dad set up a bunch of watermelons, and he shot each watermelon with different calibers, shotguns, rifles, pistols. And you actually witnessed the destruction of what they're capable of. And it put a little, I don't want to say fear, but reverence to what they're capable of. And to me, there's always the idiots, in every realm of anything. There's a rotten apple that tries to spoil it for everybody else. Mm-hmm. But I do stand very firm on our Second Amendment. I don't think the guys that wrote the Second Amendment just didn't get back from a hunting trip. They just got done liberating the country. So I think that's important to not lose. But you also have the guys that they're out there, radical pro-gun guys, they do just as much harm as the inexperienced, irresponsible side. So as a whole, I think it's like any other issue. Pick the topic, and you can find somewhere in the middle. You've got a responsible group that takes it serious, and the laws kind of prove that. That's the part that just floors me is, you don't in gun popular states that have are very accepting to firearms and see the value in firearms and protection, you don't have these mass shootings. You know, where you have them is where there's strict gun control, and that you can't even argue that. Like that's the part that doesn't make sense to me. It's so clear that the more laws you put against firearms, you're just giving the criminals that many more opportunities.
I don't know, man. Nobody ever gets shot in Chicago. I don't know what you're talking about, man. This is Josh Shakur. He is a gay, furry, gun-loving Christian. He wants to know what your thoughts about the USCCA are.
Hey, Josh. Actually, I used to promote them a lot. So the USCCA is an organization that started up, and basically your membership is a insurance policy. So you can pick, I don't remember, there's four different levels. It's not a bad idea because the average cost, even if you do everything right, the average cost on the litigation side is going to cost you about 30 to 50 grand. And that's just to find out you're innocent. So I think it's good, but I'm starting to hear some things about them not representing or actually putting up the money like they say. One thing on that topic I would definitely do is find a well-versed Second Amendment attorney that you kind of have in your contact somewhere.
Right.
Jessica was asking when the next and by the way, the concealed carry class is completely at capacity right now, right? So
Yes.
just wondering if you have any idea when your next class will be.
I'm going to try to do one next month, but I'll give more notice. So just put this out, the incident that happened south of town, I'm close friends with both families involved, and my phone started blowing up immediately for these classes. I'm like,
Right.
I'm not going to do one right now and make it look like I'm taking advantage of a bad
Right.
situation.
Yeah.
So I spoke to several of the family members, and they actually and gave me their blessing. So that's kind of why this one popped up so quick. But I'm going to plan on doing one in May, and then I'm going to try to do a women's self-defense class, at least one this summer before a lot of the high school girls go off to college. So I usually try to do one of those in July. So that's kind of the plan going forward. And I need to mention too, Dusty Brillhart helped. He's the emergency manager, EMS director, also a law enforcement officer. He helps me out with these classes. Another class we've done it's called Stop the Bleed. So it's kind of a basic traumatic, rough EMS type class that you can take if you encounter going down the road and you see a wreck. You know, you can possibly help save a life or something.
Right.
But we're going to try to tie all that together. So he helps me out with all these classes. So hopefully we'll get this rolling and stay a little more consistent.
Anthony Honavirus wants to know if they hurt a family member in the home and they're running away, is it justified for lethal force?
So that's going to depend on the state again, but it depends if you can convince a jury that your life was threatened.
Yeah, I would say, generally speaking, shooting at a target that's running away from you is not a good idea. Generally speaking. Now there are, special circumstances, but
yeah. So one scenario I always talk about is if you hear loud noises, you look out your window, someone's breaking into your car, you go out there and confront them. Whatever ensues, you end up shooting them. You might have been justified at that point, but the prosecutor's going to say, why'd you even leave your house?
Yeah.
You weren't threatened. So you went and initiated the conflict. That's how thin that line gets.
Yeah. They'll ask, why didn't you call the police instead? Yeah.
JR says 3 things that always work: a Mac computer, a baseball bat, and a revolver.
I'd add a pump shotgun to that.
And
too.
Rhonda Rich says a bird shot will blind a person. Yeah. Okay. Well, I think it's great, man. Like, I'm somebody who just 100% honestly, like, I grew up in Kansas, so I didn't have a problem with guns. Moved to the East Coast when I was like 18. It became pretty lame, and I started hating on guns and everything. But like, what made me kind of change my mind was like, I was like, okay, like if I really think guns are bad, like unless I can find a button that melts all of them and then melts all like diagrams to make new ones, like you should probably just get a gun. Even if you're anti-gun, like you should probably get a gun. You know, at this point, because the bad people have them. You know what I mean? Like, and like, you know, just response rates are crazy. You know, like you can call the police and it doesn't mean they're going to be at your house anytime soon. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and you know, even our law enforcement, you know, they do the best they can, but middle of the night, you know, we always have openings for officers because we can't fill them, and you know, the one guy on duty might be up by Richfield. You know, you just don't know. So, and the other thing, especially for a woman, I mean, I don't want to get into the whole women have power thingy. It's not what I'm getting at, but
Yeah,
you know, just in most cases, they don't have the strength to overcome a man in most cases.
Yeah.
And you know, a firearm is an equalizer. And for a man who, you know, the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. So, and unless you're, you know, Bruce Lee or Jason Statham or one of those guys that can catch bullets and do cool stuff, which I'm not. So,
Brandon Smith says, I got my concealed carry in North Carolina. I did it for about a month and wasn't liking how bold it made me feel. From then on, it wasn't on my person. What do you teach people about the emotional switch that will flip from carrying?
That's a great question. I mentioned it earlier. It's a lifestyle change. I mean, to the point of you've got to find a holster you're comfortable with. You might have to buy bigger pants, different shirts. You might have to completely change your style of dress in order to do it. And you know, at the end of the day, it comes down to what are you comfortable with. I carry. If I'm in the swimming pool, that's probably the only time I'm not carrying, but it's still not very far away, you know. So I've just adapted to it, and I made myself. And at first, you know, I remember when I first started carrying, I thought everybody in the world was staring at me. They know, oh my gosh, you know. And now, you know, it's just if I don't have it, I feel very vulnerable. Just
right.
Yeah,
I get that.
Yeah, I think it's
okay. So, do you teach hunter safety as well?
I do not. There are two guys here in town that do.
Okay. What kind of an age would you recommend that kids get involved in a hunter safety program?
I kind of think it depends on the maturity of the kid. I think my kids were 8 or 9 when they took it.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of opens up, you know. I think it's good for the gun safety. I don't know if kids are necessarily equipped to take an animal's life at that age, but you know, that's a parent's choice. But I will drop this. So the state of Kansas changed, I think it was in 2019, that you can take the concealed carry course and concealed carry at the age of 18. Which is confusing to people because you have to be 21 to actually purchase a firearm. But if one is gifted to you, then you can legally take the class and carry at 18.
Okay. Yeah. That is a little odd. Yeah. But yeah, that's the thing to me is I wish that there was an outlet other than just, of course, parents should be a lot of that, but I wish there was an outlet other than just those hunter safety courses for teaching, you know, kids how to handle a firearm and teaching them the safety aspects of it.
Yeah. And the NRA as a whole has a lot of great programs for that, that I just need to dedicate some time to do it because it is something I'm passionate about. And I know Doc, Derek's son, he's real curious, and he gave me 2 high fives, so he's getting a free private lesson right there. Derek told him how to work me, but no, I think the main thing is the kids initially come to it with the excitement of what they're
Right.
getting to do, and they're basing that off of their video games. So
Absolutely.
teaching
Yeah.
gun safety today is completely different than how we were taught,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah.
And just getting them that switch in their head to understand the devastation that just what that firearm can do.
Yeah.
It's not, you don't reset the Xbox. It's game over. So
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, because I've told some people when I was in Phoenix, I was like, I think I want my kids to watch somebody shoot an animal, just because like growing up, I've been in rooms as a kid where some idiot kid was like, "You guys want to play with my dad's gun?" And like I was the one that was like, "Nah," so I would go outside. But I think if a kid saw an animal get killed by a gun, like it would really make them question. Like if somebody just pulled out a gun, like, "Hey, we're gonna play with this like it's a toy," I think any kid that witnessed that would be like, "No." Like, because I do think that the video game aspect, the movie aspect of it, like it's really easy to look at a gun and not give it the respect that you should, like it's really easy to look at a gun and just think that it is a toy, you know what I mean?
yeah, and the airsoft world and paintball world, that's all kind of counterproductive. And you should watch my kids. I messed up as a dad more ways than I did right, but one thing I always was proud about, my boys would get all decked out to go airsoft war,
Mhm.
and they didn't violate one gun safety thing until the war ensued.
Right,
Then
yeah.
of course you do, but even as soon as it was over, I mean, that gun was down, pointed in a safe direction, and it was just kind of neat to watch them that they took that with them in the airsoft
Yeah.
world.
Because if they've learned it well, it's a habit. It's
Right.
not, you know what I'm saying? It's not even something you think about. I mean, good trigger discipline and muzzle discipline it's a habit.
So we will let you go, man, because Norm's got a few things he's got to go over. But one thing I wanted to end on was like kind of this community and everything. Like there's a lot of firearms and vehicles and houses all throughout this community, and yet like as far as like mayhem goes, anytime like you hear debates about should we have concealed carry or not, you see like certain people saying that the streets are going to run with blood and all that. But with the amount of firearms that are sitting in this zip code, is it safe to say that people are kind of good? Like, I mean, we're not great, but I mean, there's so many instruments in this little area that could take lives, and nobody's doing it. You know what I mean?
Right. And that goes back to the gun free zones versus the gun pro zones. It's just the majority of gun owners are responsible. Or,
Absolutely.
I mean, you take a gun show. How many shootings happen at a gun show?
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of one.
Yep.
And there's more guns and people in there than
Yeah.
at one time. So yeah, it's a good place to live, and it's a good tool to have, learn and just put in your toolbox.
Yeah, and I'm glad you used the term tool, because to me a gun is a tool just like a hammer or a saw or anything else, and you need to learn how to use it properly, just like any tool.
Exactly.
Two more questions and we'll let you go, JB. She wants to know if you have to have a concealed carry in Kansas.
You do not have to have the concealed carry license to conceal carry within the state of Kansas. However, to leave the state of Kansas and conceal, you do.
Do you know, like, since we're our main states are Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, and New Mexico, do you know, like, are you pretty protected in this general five state area? Or
yeah, all those. I think the closest state to us would be Illinois. That they do have a concealed carry law, but they don't reciprocate with any states. And then basically you can it not to get political, but you can look at the red and blue map and pretty much figure out what states you can and can't carry.
Yeah, just use your road trip based on that.
It is. I will add though,
Right.
It is your responsibility to follow the laws of the state you're going into. So you need to do some research.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then Anthony Honavar, so why do civilians have access to assault rifles?
What's your definition of an assault rifle?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, my guess is, Anthony, what you mean by an assault rifle is a fully automatic weapon, and civilians do not have access to those. Okay, actually, that's not completely true. There is a a class 3 federal FFW or FFL that would have access to it, but that's very limited. Okay. But most people, when they're talking about an assault rifle, what they're talking about is a semi-automatic rifle, like an AR platform rifle. And to call that an assault rifle is, to me, generally based purely on cosmetics. It looks like a military rifle, but it doesn't fire like a military rifle. And all the things that you hear politicians and media people say about that rifle, about the power of it and things like that, are actually ridiculous if you know anything about firearms. The projectile in an AR-15, which is a 5.56, okay, a 5.56 millimeter, the actual circumference of that projectile is about the same as a pencil eraser. Okay. So yeah, a lot of that is a lot of people's objections and calling things assault rifles is based in a profound ignorance of firearms a lot of times.
Yeah. Well, what day? I know you're full, but what day is your class, and what time is it from, and everything? And
It's this Saturday at the Church of God right there on Main Street in Elkhart at 8 a.m.
8 a.m. and it's an 8-hour class.
Yes, sir.
So like when they're done, they'll get like a certificate and everything. It's like all official. And like, what does that essentially just means that they can carry their gun without they can hide their gun and they're not going to get in any trouble.
So once they complete my class, they'll get a certificate from me, and then they'll call the law enforcement center wherever they're from and schedule a time to come do fingerprints.
Okay.
And then they have to pay that sheriff's office $32.50. And then that sheriff's office mails it to the attorney general's office. That's who the department that handles our stuff. Used to, you had to pay another $100 to the attorney general's office, but they just waived that in 2023. So,
yep.
Nice. Norm, did you have any more questions before we let him go, man? Or
no, I don't. Thanks for being with us this evening, JW. I learned some things, and it was good to hear your voice again. I hadn't been a long time since I talked to you.
Yeah, I appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, man. All right. We will. We're gonna be here. I'm gonna let JW out, and then Norm is going to have some topics for us. We got about 15 minutes left before Kansas Missing Unsolved. 1 second.
All right. So a couple of things we're going to talk about here. First of all is one of the things that a lot of people are interested in is the fact that there was a 5th suspect arrested in the Jillian Kelly, Veronica Butler murder case. Paul Grice, who we talked about when we read the affidavit of probable cause, was arrested today. There is a new affidavit that has been issued of probable cause for Paul Davis, and basically it's the same affidavit that was released for the other 4 suspects, with just a couple of additions that I'm going to read you here. Okay. All right. So here are the additions to the affidavit of probable cause. There are basically 2 additions to the original affidavit of probable cause, and that is this one. On April 13th, 2024, a search warrant was executed at Beasley's property, and an excavation of a possible burial site was commenced. On April 14th, 2024, the hole was excavated. The bodies of Butler and Kelly were located. And the next addition is on April 23rd, 2024, Grice was interviewed and admitted that he was a part of the planning and killing of both Butler and Kelly. Grice admitted to your affiant that he participated in the killing of Butler and Kelly and their subsequent burial. And that is the probable cause for the arrest of Paul Grice. Okay. And so that's it. That's just the facts. That's, what we've got in the affidavit of probable cause. And I think a lot of people had a lot of questions from the beginning as to why it was that Paul Grice had not been arrested and what was going on with Paul Grice and all of that. And now we've got hopefully at least some answers to those questions. Now, listen, I know that there was a lot of impatience with the situation, but I'm going to tell you guys, with arrests being made in 2 weeks and now another arrest made shortly thereafter, this is actually moving at a very quick pace for an investigation of this type. And now we're to the court phase, and that doesn't mean that the investigation is not ongoing. I'll guarantee you it's still an ongoing investigation. Investigations are still being conducted, but we're moving to the court phase now. There will be an arraignment for Paul Grice soon, like there was for the other four. The other four will move to a preliminary hearing on May 15th, and it's at that preliminary hearing that they will enter a plea and do all that kind of stuff. And then from there, we'll move to setting the trial. And so things don't move real quickly, especially once the courts start to get involved. And again, it depends on your frame of reference, but it can sometimes seem like things move incredibly frustratingly slowly once we get involved in the court system. And so just kind of keep in mind that, things may not happen quite as quickly as you would like, but things are going on. I want to talk to you a little bit about next week too, while we've got just a few minutes left here. Next week, some of the topics that we're going to cover, and they're topics that kind of indirectly relate to this case. And that is, next week, we're going to talk about American state nationals and what that means. We're going to talk about go a little more in depth into the idea of sovereign citizens and their relationship, their origin and their relationship in the QAnon kind of conspiracy theory circle of thought. And we'll talk a little bit more about the origins of QAnon and some of those theories as well. So those are all things that we're going to kind of tackle next week. Another thing that we're going to tackle next week, and a very interesting study came out this week that to me explains a lot about our world. And that is the fact that for the first time ever, the average IQ in the United States has dropped. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, we are getting dumber. And that's one of the things we'll talk about next week. And and it may oddly tie into some of the other things we're talking about.
Well, one
next
thing
week.
I'll say on that is, like, I saw somebody post, and I was like telling, I think Brian that day, like before you get really frustrated, like with another human being you're like trying to like have a conversation with, like you really should calm down, because there's a really good chance that they're stupid. Like, not even trying to be a dick, but like that there's a lot of people who just I saw a thing that said that like it was like crazy about how many grown-ups in America can't read past a 5th grade level, which is fine. Yeah, it's a product of our education system.
Actually, a 5th or 6th grade level is a functioning adult level. Yeah.
But still, in China, they can read in the 5th grade level when they're like 2 years old. Like, it's just like there definitely is an issue with like knowledge and our country. Like, we're not absorbing as much, I don't feel like. And I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, well,
I don't read too good.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's one of the things that those are some things that we'll talk about and address next week. What are some of the reasons that the IQ is dropping? What does that mean? Does it mean that we're turning into a nation of dumbasses? Is idiocracy coming real in front of us? I'm not going to go that far, but we need to talk about the ramifications of that. And so those are some of the main topics we're going to talk about next week.
I do have homework for you.
Okay, great.
So I'm gonna have you shit on my childhood heroes again next week.
Okay, great.
So
I love it.
This week I'm gonna have you, between now and next show, I'm gonna have you listen to the album East 1999 by a group called Bone Thugs and Harmony.
Okay, I've at least heard of them. Yeah.
So to me, to describe them, it would basically be like they are boys to men, but they have firearms. It's 4 black dudes who sing in harmony, but they do gangster rap, and
Oh Lord.
very interesting stuff. Like Brian, help me out here. Were you a big Bone fan? You're younger than me.
Yeah, and they partake in the cannabis.
They're
they
big
talk
weed
about that
guys.
a lot.
Norm.
Well, there we go.
Hey, somebody gave us some money. It looks like Carrie DeSpain gave us some stars. That's awesome. But yeah, I'll have you listen to East 1999 and shit all over it next week in front of my friends. And
I can feel it coming.
1995 hip hop, and these guys were found by Eazy-E before he died of AIDS. Like he Cleveland rap group.
I would just like to agree with what Peggy Lewis Parker has said here, that talking to some people will make you stupid. I agree.
Yeah.
I have been in several of those conversations where afterwards I thought I am stupider for having been a part of this conversation.
What about the Chinese coming into San Diego? What is that about, Norm?
Well, I don't know. I'll have to check into that. That's something that I'll have to take a little look at. But yeah, so those are some of the things we're going to take a look at next week. Like I said, we're going to take a look at the history of the sovereign citizen movement, and as we talk about that, we're going to talk about one of its newest phases, which is the American State National. And Paul Grice, some paperwork came out this week that shows that he's an American State National, and we'll talk about what that means. Then we will take a look at the origins of the sovereign citizen movement and the whole QAnon conspiracy theory, and we'll talk a little bit about the history and origin of QAnon, and how crazy it is that people on the right wing are listening to what was essentially a hoax on a message board that mostly catered to marijuana enthusiasts and porn enthusiasts.
So DHA basically.
Yeah, I guess. So anyway, we'll kind of talk about that next week, as well as talking about our average IQ dropping, and I'll check out this about the Chinese coming into San Diego, see if I can find any information on
I have a wildlife question for you. What is a creel limit?
Okay, so a creel limit is the number of fish that you are allowed to possess.
So 5 a day at the ponds in Elkhart?
Yeah.
Wow.
But now the species is not there. The sign has weathered. So you've got a creel limit. I think it's a creel limit of 5 for smallmouth bass, and then I think there's a creel limit of 5 for catfish as well. Okay, so it's actually 2 different creel limits for 2 different species, if I remember right. But if you need to know that information, you'll also find it in your Kansas hunting and fishing regulations as well.
Okay. All right. Well, that's going to be the show. Norm's going to listen to Bone Thugs and Harmony on purpose. Anthony Honnemeyer says, "Go OKC Thunder."
On purpose, but against my will.
I'll let it. Anthony Honnemeyer also says, "Come to church and take a gun class." What happened to "Thou shalt not kill"? What happened to "Thou shalt not steal"? Anthony, tell these dirtbags to get out of my house. Quit trying to steal my shit, man. All right. I think that's going to be it for us.
Yeah. Thank you for being with us this week, guys.
You guys going to? What was your question? It didn't show up, Carrie. Let me go look on. It's not showing up in our studio, but I can go look on.
While he's doing that, I'm going to tell you thanks for being with us. Go to Back Home Media and check out Back Home Media's webpage. Check out the services they offer, the podcasts that they offer. Also,
she wanted to know if we had any idea where the children were in that case. I don't. Do you know, Norm?
Yes. The children right now are with Veronica's family.
But not like a state custody type situation. They're with family.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's an important question, Carl.
Yeah.
I didn't see that.
Last I knew, and I assume it's still true, they were with Veronica's father.
Okay. Well, that's good, man. Yeah. That's good.
But I think there is a family support system there that, yeah. So.
Okay. All right. We'll get out of here. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Take it easy.